The grandfather clock in Senator Elena Rodriguez's office struck 4:47 a.m. with a hollow chime that seemed to echo through the empty corridors of the Hart Senate office building. The only other sound was the soft rustle of paper as Rodriguez turned another page in the thick manila folder spread across her mahogany desk. Empty coffee cups formed a defensive perimeter around stacks of legal documents, transcripts, and printed emails that painted a troubling picture of political allegiance over constitutional duty. Rodriguez rubbed her tired eyes, the steel-gray irises reflecting the harsh fluorescent light that had been her companion through this sleepless night. At 52, she had seen enough confirmation hearings to know when a nominee was hiding something significant. But this case felt different, more consequential, more dangerous to the very foundations of American justice. Her chief counsel, David Chen, looked up from his laptop where had been cross-referencing public statements with court filings. "Senator, we have enough contradictions here to sink a battleship. But are you sure you want to go nuclear on day one?" Rodriguez's fingers drummed against the desk, a habit she had developed during her prosecutor days when building cases against white-collar defendants. "David, when someone seeks to lead the Department of Justice while having publicly defended actions that courts later ruled fraudulent, that's not going nuclear. That's called doing our job." The phone buzzed. Senate Minority Leader Patricia Walsh's name appeared on the caller ID. "Elena, I know it's early, but I had to call." Walsh's voice carried the weight of political urgency. "The polls are brutal. 63% of Americans want Bondi confirmed. The press is calling us obstructionist before we've even asked our first question." Rodriguez stood and walked to her window, gazing out at the pre-dawn darkness that blanketed the Capitol grounds. Early morning joggers were already making their rounds, their breath visible in the January cold. "Patricia, since when do we confirm Attorney General nominees based on polling data rather than qualifications?" "Since the other party started treating every hearing like a coronation ceremony," Walsh replied with a bitter laugh. "Just be surgical, Elena. Make it count, but don't give them ammunition to paint you as partisan." After ending the call, Rodriguez returned to her desk where Chen was highlighting another passage in yellow marker. The documents before them told a story of calculated political maneuvering that seemed to prioritize personal loyalty over legal principles. Public statements praising charitable organizations just months before those same organizations faced judicial dissolution for misconduct. Television interviews defending actions that prosecutors were simultaneously investigating for potential violations. "Senator, look at this timeline," Chen said, sliding a spreadsheet across the desk. February 2019, Bondi appears on Fox News defending the Trump Foundation's charitable work. March 2019, New York prosecutors announce expanded investigation into foundation practices. June 2019, Bondi gives another interview calling the investigation politically motivated. December 2019, court orders foundation dissolution citing pattern of illegal conduct. Rodriguez studied the timeline, her prosecutor's instincts recognizing the familiar pattern of someone trying to stay ahead of bad news. And she never corrected her public statements after the court ruling? Not once. In fact, she doubled down in a 2020 interview, claiming the dissolution was judicial overreach. The office door opened, and Rodriguez's press secretary, Maria Santos, entered carrying a steaming cup of coffee and wearing the expression of someone who'd been monitoring social media all night. "Senator, you need to see this," Maria said, setting down the coffee and opening her tablet. "Bondi's team has been very busy. They've got surrogates on every morning show talking about how she's the most qualified attorney general nominee in decades. They're trying to frame any tough questioning as an attack on women in leadership." Rodriguez took a sip of the coffee, feeling the caffeine begin its familiar magic. "What's the hashtag count?" Hashtag confirm Bondi is trending at number 3 with 400,000 mentions. Hashtag Bondi hearing is at number 7 with 200,000. They've got a serious ground game. Chen looked up from his laptop. "Senator, there's something else. I've been digging into the donor records, and there's a pattern of contributions from Bondi to Trump-related causes right around the time she was making these public statements defending his foundation." "How much are we talking about?" $50,000 over 6 months. All to different Trump political committees. Rodriguez felt her pulse quicken. Political contributions weren't illegal, but the timing suggested a level of coordination that could undermine Bondi's claims of objective legal analysis. David, can we establish a clear timeline showing the contributions alongside her public statements? Already working on it. At 6:15 a.m., Rodriguez's secure phone rang with a priority alert. The caller ID showed only a number, but she recognized the voice immediately. Jonathan Mitchell, a veteran investigative reporter from the Washington Post, had broken several major stories about political misconduct during the previous administration. Senator Rodriguez, I need to see you immediately. I have something that changes everything about today's hearing. Jonathan, you know I can't meet with reporters on hearing day. It compromises. This isn't about a story. This is about justice. Meet me in the parking garage. Level B3, northwest corner. 10 minutes. The line went dead. Rodriguez looked at Chen and Santos, both watching her with concerned expressions. I need to step out for a few minutes. Keep working on that timeline. The parking garage at 6:25 a.m. was a concrete cathedral of shadows and fluorescent lighting. Rodriguez found Mitchell standing next to his silver Honda, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His usually neat appearance was disheveled, and his hands shook slightly as he reached into his jacket pocket. Elena, I've been working sources in the Justice Department for months on a different story, but yesterday I stumbled onto something that connects directly to Bondi. He pulled out a small USB drive. This contains audio recordings of private conversations between Bondi and Trump's legal team from 2019 and 2020. Rodriguez's stomach tightened. Jonathan, if those recordings were obtained illegally, they weren't. One of the participants recorded them and leaked them to protect themselves. The Justice Department has been sitting on this for 6 months, afraid to act during an election year. What's on them? Mitchell's expression grew grim. Bondi explicitly promising to use the Attorney General position to resolve certain ongoing legal complications for Trump. She talks about having complete control over prosecutorial decisions and ensuring that past investigations don't become future problems. Rodriguez felt the world shift around her. If authentic, these recordings didn't just show poor judgment, they revealed a candidate willing to corrupt the Justice Department for political purposes. Why bring this to me? Why not publish it? Because publication takes time, and time is something we don't have. Your hearing starts in 90 minutes. The American people deserve to hear this before senators vote. Rodriguez stared at the USB drive, understanding that accepting it would fundamentally change not just the hearing, but potentially her entire career. Using leaked recordings in a confirmation hearing would trigger a firestorm of accusations about political dirty tricks and constitutional violations. How do I know this is authentic? Because the person who recorded it is willing to testify under oath. But only if there's a formal proceeding that offers witness protection. Back in her office at 6:45 a.m., Rodriguez sat alone with the USB drive on her desk, staring at it like it might explode. Chen and Santos had gone to make final preparations for the hearing, leaving her with the most consequential decision of her political career. Her computer chimed with an encrypted message from an unknown sender. They know about the recordings. Be careful. Rodriguez's blood ran cold. If Bondi's team or the White House knew about the recordings, they would be prepared with explanations, alternative narratives, or worse, they might try to discredit the source before the evidence could be presented. At 7:15 a.m., Rodriguez slipped the USB drive into her jacket pocket and walked toward the hearing room, her mind racing through possibilities and consequences. The corridors were filling with staff members, reporters, and early arriving spectators, all drawn by the political gravity of the moment. As she entered the ornate hearing room with its marble columns and mahogany panels, Rodriguez saw Bondi already seated at the witness table, looking confident and composed in a navy blue suit that projected both authority and approachability. Bondi's legal team whispered final instructions while photographers captured every angle. The gallery buzzed with anticipation as C-SPAN cameras performed final equipment checks. Rodriguez took her seat at the committee table, the USB drive feeling like a lead weight in her pocket. Across the room, Bondi met her eyes and offered a slight nod of professional courtesy, the greeting of one lawyer to another before battle commenced. Chairman Marcus Webb called the hearing to order at exactly 8 a.m. The committee will come to order. Today we consider the nomination of Pamela Bondi to serve as Attorney General of the United States. Rodriguez opened her folder of prepared questions, but her hand instinctively moved to her jacket pocket where the USB drive waited. In 90 minutes of testimony, she would have to decide whether to use evidence that could end Bondi's nomination or destroy her own career in the process. The confirmation crucible was about to begin. The Klieg lights blazed with television intensity as Chairman Webb's gavel struck the mahogany block 3 times, each sound echoing through the packed hearing room like gunshots. Rodriguez felt her pulse synchronize with the rhythmic clicking of camera shutters while CSPN's viewer counter climbed past 8 million Americans tuning in to witness what political commentators were already calling the most contentious confirmation hearing in a generation. Pamela Bondi sat ramrod straight at the witness table, her platinum blonde hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. Her navy blue suit projected confidence, but Rodriguez noticed the almost imperceptible tremor in her left hand as she adjusted the microphone. Behind Bondi, a phalanx of Republican strategists and legal advisors filled the front row, their faces betraying nothing but their smartphones betraying everything as they frantically monitored social media sentiment in real time. Ms. Bondi, Chairman Webb began with the practiced gravitas of someone who'd overseen dozens of these proceedings. Please raise your right hand and swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. As Bondi recited the oath, Rodriguez's fingers unconsciously moved to her jacket pocket where the USB drive seemed to burn against her ribs. The encrypted warning from earlier that morning played on repeat in her mind. They know about the recordings. Be careful. Bondi launched into her opening statement with the polish of someone who'd spent decades in public service. Chairman Webb, distinguished members of the committee, it is the honor of my lifetime to appear before you today seeking confirmation as the Attorney General of the United States. For 30 years, I have dedicated my career to the pursuit of justice, the protection of victims, and the enforcement of our nation's laws without fear or favor. Rodriguez studied Bondi's body language, noting the slight emphasis on without fear or favor, a phrase that felt like preemptive damage control. Her prosecutor's instincts recognized the subtle tells of someone preparing to defend actions they knew would be questioned. The Department of Justice stands as the crown jewel of American law enforcement, Bondi continued, her voice growing stronger with each sentence. If confirmed, I pledge to restore dignity, integrity, and impartial justice to an institution that has suffered too much political interference in recent years. Republican senators nodded approvingly while their Democratic counterparts maintained poker faces. Rodriguez felt her BlackBerry vibrate with a text from Chen, timeline ready. Financial records confirm suspicious pattern. When Bondi concluded her 12-minute opening statement to polite applause from the gallery, Chairman Webb turned to Rodriguez. Senator Rodriguez, you have 30 minutes for initial questioning. Rodriguez opened her leather portfolio, revealing a stack of documents organized with the precision of a trial attorney presenting closing arguments. Thank you, Chairman Webb. Ms. Bondi, I want to begin by examining your public statements regarding charitable organizations and their legal obligations. She lifted a transcript marked with yellow highlighting. On February 15, 2019, you appeared on Fox News Sunday and made the following statement about the Trump Foundation. This organization has been a beacon of charitable excellence for decades, providing millions of dollars to worthy causes across America. Do you recall making that statement? Bondi's media training kicked in immediately. Senator, I've made thousands of public statements during my career. If you have a specific transcript, I'd be happy to review it. I do indeed. Rodriguez slid a copy across the table. Take your time. As Bondi scanned the document, Rodriguez continued building her case. Ms. Bondi, were you aware at the time you made that statement that the New York Attorney General's office had already begun investigating the Trump Foundation for potential violations of state charity law? Senator, I don't recall the specific timing of various investigations. Rodriguez's voice sharpened. Let me help refresh your memory. She produced another document. This is a New York Times article dated February 1, 2019, 2 weeks before your television appearance, detailing the ongoing investigation. The article specifically mentions concerns about self-dealing and improper political coordination. Senator Webb, the ranking Republican, leaned forward. Senator Rodriguez, I fail to see the relevance of media speculation to Ms. Bondi's qualifications. The relevance, Senator Webb, will become crystal clear. Rodriguez turned back to Bondi. Ms. Bondi, 6 months after your appearance praising the Trump Foundation as a beacon of charitable excellence, that same organization was ordered by a New York state court to dissolve completely. Are you familiar with that court order? Bondi's composure showed its first crack. Senator, court proceedings involve complex legal questions that, Ms. Bondi, this is a yes or no question. Are you familiar with the December 2019 court order dissolving the Trump Foundation? Yes. And are you familiar with the court's specific findings? Rodriguez lifted a thick legal document. The judge wrote, and I quote, "The foundation operated for Mr. Trump's benefit rather than for charitable purposes. This pattern of illegal conduct included coordinating with the Trump presidential campaign, which was not permissible under Treasury guidelines." The hearing room fell silent except for the mechanical whir of television cameras zooming in on Bondi's face. Rodriguez noticed beads of perspiration forming at Bondi's hairline despite the room's Arctic air conditioning. Senator, court decisions involve, Ms. Bondi, after this court ruling finding a pattern of illegal conduct, did you ever publicly correct your previous statements praising the foundation? I don't recall making any subsequent statements. Rodriguez's aide, Maria Santos, approached quietly and placed a new folder on the table. Rodriguez opened it to reveal another television transcript. Ms. Bondi, let me direct your attention to your appearance on Sean Hannity's program on January 20, 2021, month after the court's dissolution order. You stated, and I quote, "The dissolution of the Trump Foundation represents judicial overreach at its worst. These partisan prosecutors destroyed a legitimate charitable organization to score political points." The gallery erupted in murmurs. Chairman Webb gabbled for order, but the damage was done. Social media exploded as political operatives from both parties recognized the devastating contradiction. Bondi's legal team huddled in whispered consultation. Senator, my statement reflected concerns about prosecutorial motivation, not the underlying facts of the case. Ms. Bondi, how can you characterize a court-ordered dissolution based on findings of illegal conduct as judicial overreach? Because courts sometimes exceed their authority in politically charged cases. Rodriguez felt the USB drive in her pocket like a loaded weapon. This was the moment she could introduce the recordings and potentially end Bondi's nomination immediately. But something in Bondi's confident deflection made her pause. The warning echoed again, they know about the recordings. Instead, Rodriguez pivoted to financial records. Ms. Bondi, I'd like to examine your personal political contributions during the period we've been discussing. She produced a Federal Election Commission printout. Between February and August 2019, you donated $50,000 to various Trump political committees. Can you explain this pattern of giving? Republican Senator Lisa Chen interrupted. Point of order, Chairman Webb. Ms. Bondi's legal political contributions are not relevant to her qualifications. Senator Chen, they'll allow the questioning to continue, Webb ruled, though his tone suggested growing impatience. Rodriguez pressed forward. Ms. Bondi, your first contribution of $25,000 was made on February 20, 2019, 5 days after your Fox News appearance praising the Trump Foundation. Your second contribution was made on March 15, just days before you gave another interview defending the foundation. Do you see any connection between your public statements and your political contributions? Bondi's voice hardened. Senator Rodriguez, I resent the implication that my political giving influenced my professional opinions. I've supported candidates and causes I believe in throughout my career. And did you believe in defending an organization that courts later found engaged in illegal conduct? I believed in defending due process and resisting political persecution. The phrase political persecution sent a chill through Rodriguez's spine. It was almost identical to language in the leaked recordings, Bondi discussing how to frame prosecutorial decisions as partisan attacks. The temptation to play the audio grew overwhelming, but Rodriguez's instincts screamed caution. Her BlackBerry buzzed with an urgent message from an unknown number. FBI raided source's home 20 minutes ago. Files seized. Be careful what you use. Rodriguez's blood turned to ice water. If the FBI had moved against her source, it meant the Justice Department, possibly under political pressure, was actively trying to prevent the recordings from surfacing. Using them now could backfire spectacularly, potentially compromising her credibility and derailing the entire hearing. She made a split-second decision to abandon the recordings and rely solely on public statements and financial records. Ms. Bondi, let's focus on your understanding of the Attorney General's role. If confirmed, would you recuse yourself from any matters involving the former president? The question hung in the hearing room like a live grenade. Bondi's pause lasted only 3 seconds, but in political time it felt like an eternity. Every camera focused on her face as she calculated responses. Senator, I would follow all appropriate ethical guidelines and consult with department ethics officials on any potential conflicts. That's not what I asked. Would you recuse yourself from matters involving Donald Trump? I would handle all matters according to law and ethical requirements. Rodriguez leaned forward. Ms. Bondi, that's a non-answer. The American people deserve to know whether you would maintain prosecutorial independence from someone who appointed you. Senator Rodriguez, I would maintain independence from all political influences. Including from the person who nominated you? Another pause. Another calculation. Including from anyone who might seek to compromise the Department of Justice's mission. Rodriguez sensed an opening. Ms. Bondi, in your view, what would constitute compromising the Department of Justice's mission? Any attempt to use prosecutorial power for political purposes rather than legitimate law enforcement objectives. And if a former president asked you to close investigations into his conduct, would that constitute using prosecutorial power for political purposes? Bondi's face flushed. Senator, I have never discussed closing any investigations with anyone. The phrase hung in the air like an accusation Rodriguez hadn't made. The hearing room erupted as reporters recognized the significance of Bondi's defensive response. She had revealed knowledge of conversations about closing investigations that Rodriguez hadn't mentioned. Rodriguez's heart raced as she realized Bondi had just confirmed the existence of exactly the kind of discussions captured on the leaked recordings. Without meaning to, Bondi had validated the audio evidence Rodriguez couldn't use. Ms. Bondi, Rodriguez said slowly, I never asked whether you had discussed closing investigations. I asked a hypothetical question about what you would do if asked. Why did you assume I was referring to actual conversations? The hearing room fell silent as the implications sank in. Bondi's legal team frantically passed notes, but the damage was done. On live television, watched by millions of Americans, she had essentially confessed to the very discussions the leaked recordings documented. Chairman Webb called for a 15-minute recess, but Rodriguez knew the hearing's trajectory had fundamentally shifted. Without using the compromised recordings, she had maneuvered Bondi into confirming their contents through her own words. As senators filed out for the break, Rodriguez caught Bondi's eye across the room. The nominee's confident facade had cracked, replaced by the expression of someone who realized they had just walked into a trap of their own making. The 15-minute recess stretched into 37 minutes as frantic negotiations erupted behind closed doors. Rodriguez remained in her seat, watching CSPN's split-screen show Talking Heads dissecting Bondi's accidental revelation while the viewer count climbed past 15 million. Her BlackBerry vibrated incessantly with messages from Senate leadership, cable news producers, and political operatives who recognized they were witnessing a confirmation hearing transform into a constitutional crisis in real time. Chairman Webb finally returned to the dais, his usual composed demeanor replaced by the tight-lipped expression of someone who'd spent the last half-hour fielding angry phone calls from the White House. Behind him, Bondi's legal team had tripled in size, with senior Republican strategists now flanking the witness table like a defensive wall. The committee will reconvene, Webb announced, his gavel strike lacking its earlier authority. Senator Rodriguez, you have 14 minutes remaining in your initial questioning period. Rodriguez stood slowly, feeling the weight of history in the ornate hearing room. The gallery had filled to capacity during the break, with senators' staff members lining the walls and overflow crowds watching on monitors in adjacent committee rooms. The USB drive in her pocket felt heavier than ever, but she no longer needed it. Bondi had given her something far more powerful, a live confession broadcast to the American people. Ms. Bondi, before the recess, you stated that you had never discussed closing investigations with anyone. I'd like to explore that statement further. Rodriguez's voice carried the measured tone of a prosecutor approaching a closing argument. When you made that statement, were you referring to all investigations, or specifically to investigations involving former President Trump? Bondi's media training seemed to have abandoned her entirely. Senator, I was speaking generally about prosecutorial independence. But Ms. Bondi, my question was hypothetical. I asked what you would do if asked to close investigations. I never suggested that anyone had actually made such requests. Rodriguez paused, letting the implication settle. So why did you feel compelled to deny having such conversations? The hearing room fell silent except for the mechanical whir of television cameras. Rodriguez noticed several Republican senators shifting uncomfortably in their chairs, recognizing the legal trap that had just snapped shut. Senator Rodriguez, I think there may have been some confusion about your question, Bondi replied, but her voice lacked conviction. Ms. Bondi, let me be very specific. Have you ever had conversations with anyone, including but not limited to former President Trump or his representatives, about how you might handle ongoing Justice Department investigations if confirmed as Attorney General? Republican Senator Marcus Chen shot to his feet. Point of order, Chairman Webb. Senator Rodriguez is engaging in a fishing expedition based on speculation and innuendo. Webb looked trapped between constitutional duty and political loyalty. Senator Rodriguez, please confine your questions to matters directly relevant to the nominee's qualifications. Chairman Webb, the Attorney General's willingness to maintain prosecutorial independence is directly relevant to her qualifications. Rodriguez turned back to Bondi. Ms. Bondi, I'll ask again, have you discussed with anyone how you might handle specific Justice Department investigations if confirmed? Bondi's pause stretched 5 seconds, an eternity in political time. Senator, I have had general discussions about the role of Attorney General with many people during the nomination process. Including discussions about specific cases or investigations? I may have discussed various aspects of the department's work. Rodriguez felt the momentum building like a wave about to break. Ms. Bondi, did any of those discussions involve assurances about how you would handle matters of particular interest to the person who nominated you? Senator Rodriguez, I find your line of questioning highly inappropriate, Bondi replied, but her defensive tone betrayed growing desperation. At that moment, Rodriguez's aide Maria Santos approached with urgent news whispered directly into her ear. CNN is reporting that an anonymous source just called into their live broadcast claiming to have audio recordings of Bondi making explicit promises about prosecutorial decisions. Rodriguez's blood ran cold. Someone, either Jonathan Mitchell or another source entirely, had decided to force the recordings into public view despite the FBI raid. The carefully orchestrated hearing was about to explode into uncontrolled chaos. On cue, Rodriguez noticed several reporters in the gallery frantically checking their phones while producers spoke urgently into their earpieces. The story was breaking in real time, but Rodriguez realized she needed to stay ahead of it rather than react to it. Ms. Bondi, let me ask you directly, if audio recordings emerged of you making specific commitments about prosecutorial decisions in exchange for this nomination, how would you respond? The question hit the hearing room like a thunderclap. Bondi's face drained of color as she realized Rodriguez somehow knew about the recording's existence. Republican senators erupted in simultaneous objections while Democratic members leaned forward with predatory intensity. Senator Rodriguez, I object to this entire line of hypothetical questioning, Chairman Webb declared, but his authority was crumbling in real time. Chairman Webb, I'm asking about the nominee's integrity and independence, core qualifications for Attorney General, Rodriguez replied. Ms. Bondi, would you care to answer? Bondi looked desperately toward her legal team, but they were already in full damage control mode, passing urgent notes and making frantic phone calls. Senator, any such recordings would need to be authenticated and reviewed in proper context. Ms. Bondi, you're not denying the existence of such recordings? I'm saying that conversations can be taken out of context and mischaracterized. Rodriguez felt the trap closing completely. So you're acknowledging that recordings of your conversations about prosecutorial decisions do exist? I'm saying that I've had many private conversations that, if selectively edited or misrepresented, could be misconstrued. The hearing room erupted as reporters recognized that Bondi had just confirmed the existence of exactly the kind of recordings that would disqualify any attorney general nominee. Rodriguez didn't need to play the USB drive. Bondi was destroying her own nomination with every defensive answer. Republican Senator Lisa Chen stood abruptly. Chairman Webb, I move to suspend these proceedings pending a review of any allegedly obtained recordings. But before Webb could respond, Democratic Senator James Wright intervened. Senator Chen, we can't suspend a confirmation hearing based on the nominee's own admissions. Ms. Bondi has just acknowledged the existence of recordings discussing prosecutorial decisions. Rodriguez seized the moment. Ms. Bondi, you've now confirmed that recordings existed you discussing how you would handle Justice Department investigations. Can you explain to the American people how such conversations are consistent with prosecutorial independence? Bondi's composure finally shattered completely. Senator Rodriguez, your partisan inquisition undermines the very institutions you claim to protect. This committee has descended into political theater designed to destroy public servants who dare to serve their country. The accusation of partisanship hung in the air like an indictment, but Rodriguez remained calm. Ms. Bondi, I'm simply asking about your own statements and actions. If discussing those facts constitutes partisanship, what does that say about the facts themselves? Chairman Webb pounded his gavel repeatedly as the gallery erupted in shouting matches between supporters and opponents. Capitol Police moved toward the witness table as Bondi's security detail tensed for potential evacuation. In the chaos, Rodriguez noticed something extraordinary happening. Republican Senator Patricia Walsh, a moderate from Maine who'd been considered a likely yes vote, quietly stood and walked toward the exit. Moments later, Senator David Kim of Alaska followed. Then Senator Rebecca Martinez of Arizona. The exodus of moderate Republicans wasn't lost on political observers in the gallery. Rodriguez watched CNN's live blog update in real time. Breaking, 3 GOP senators leave Bondi hearing as confirmation appears in jeopardy. Webb finally restored order, but the hearing's momentum had fundamentally shifted. Ms. Bondi, do you wish to make a closing statement? Bondi looked defeated, her political career crumbling in real time. Chairman Webb, distinguished senators, I have spent my entire career fighting for justice and the rule of law. If my words have been misconstrued or taken out of context, I regret any confusion. But I stand by my qualifications and my commitment to serve the American people with integrity. Rodriguez watched as Bondi gathered her papers, knowing that the nominee's evasive answers and accidental confirmations had accomplished what the leaked recordings could never have achieved alone. By trying to defend the indefensible, Bondi had revealed the very corruption that disqualified her from leading the nation's premier law enforcement agency. As the hearing concluded, Rodriguez remained seated while chaos swirled around her. Her BlackBerry showed 17 missed calls from Senate leadership and 43 unread messages from reporters seeking comment. But she felt strangely calm, recognizing that constitutional principles had prevailed over political calculation. Through her office window later that afternoon, Rodriguez watched protesters disperse as news broke that 2 more Republican senators had announced their opposition to the nomination. The mathematics were simple: without bipartisan support, Bondi's confirmation was effectively dead. Her secure phone rang with a familiar number, Jonathan Mitchell from the Washington Post. Elena, I don't know how you did it, but you got her to confess to everything on the recordings without actually using them. That was masterful. Jonathan, sometimes the truth has a way of emerging even when people try to suppress it. What happens now? Rodriguez looked at the USB drive still sitting on her desk, its secrets no longer needed. Now we wait for the White House to withdraw the nomination and start over with someone who understands that the Attorney General serves justice, not politics. As evening fell over the Capitol, Rodriguez finally allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The confirmation hearing had become exactly what the founders intended: a constitutional check on executive power, ensuring that no one could corrupt the institutions of justice for personal gain. The hearing was over, but the real work of protecting American democracy was just beginning.